Hey everybody, Eric of Hit Subscribe here with you today. Once again in the office here in Michigan, and life is good. So the question that I'm going to answer today is actually one I wrote a blog post about recently, which if I remember to, I will go in later and put a link to in the comments for this Facebook Live. No promises, but I'll do my best. At any rate, the subject is how much does a blog post cost? Now, if you're so inclined, go Google this because it's kind of funny. You will get just the most incredible amount of variance. I did a little research for the topic, and this was kind of spurred on by a Facebook group that I was in it's called Growth Hacks. It's for software companies. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was something like, how much do you pay for a blog post? And the range of responses was anywhere from $5 to $1,200. And I can even add on to the upper end of that range that Hit Subscribe is, depending on certain circumstances, actually charged almost double that for a blog post. So $5 to $2,500 is the answer to the question, how much does a blog post cost, which is sort of bonkers. So I want to speak to this and maybe offer kind of a simple answer to like pricing blog posts. I mean, it isn't really simple, but you can reason about it pretty simply. So if you think through why is there so much variance, the reason is because if you ask yourself who can write a blog post, the answer is any literate human being. And how long would it take that person to write a blog post? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. So what you're really asking, if you ask how much does a blog post cost, is basically how much would I have to pay a literate human being to do something of unspecified scope and time? And you might imagine it's a lot of variance there. So you need to get a little bit more specific, and that's what I'm going to talk about as the kind of simple thing here that you can do when it comes to pricing content, pricing a blog post. So step one, you want to figure out who it is that's going to be writing this blog post. And I mean like demographically. So for Hit Subscribe, for instance, most of the blog posts that we commission are going to be written by software engineers, DevOps engineers, ops people. So people in the IT org chart, people that earn a living doing software-y things. So that's our persona there. But for your purposes, maybe it's lawyers, maybe it's bank managers, maybe it's like stay-at-home unemployed people. Whoever that persona is, who's going to be writing the post, that's critically important, because what you're going to do is you're going to go figure out how much a freelance version of that persona costs on an hourly basis. I am personally really not a fan of hourly billing in any capacity, but that's the incumbent in the market. So who's writing the blog post, and what does that person charge per hour? Not for copywriting, but for that thing that they do. And the reason is because you're going to be paying someone to write for you who's going to be thinking about their time in terms of, well, if I were a freelance software engineer or lawyer or whatever, what would I charge? That's kind of my business rate. That's my going hourly rate. So if you want to get them to do anything, whether it's clean your house or write blog posts or lawyer/software engineer, you're going to have to pay their hourly rate. So figure out who that person is, figure out what their going hourly rate on the market is, and that's about what you're going to have to pay for a blog post. So I would also then add in about 4 or 5 cents a word for the editorial cost of that. So if you're commissioning a blog post for your company, that subject matter expert that you're commissioning it from is probably not also a copy editor capable of editing their own work. So you're either going to have to do that yourself or pay to have it done. So the example I used in my post about this is, if you're going out and finding a software engineer, going freelance rate for software engineers might be about $150 an hour. So you're going to have to pay them that hourly rate. The question then is, all right, how long does it take them to write a blog post? Rule of thumb, 3 hours for 1,000 words. So if you want a 2,000 word blog post, you're talking about 6 hours. That's going to be, what is that? About $900 for that blog post from a software engineer. And then you add in the hourly rate at 2,000, so that's another $80. So 980, about $1,000 you're going to pay for that blog post. So that's the simple way to reason about the price of blog content. But I would also offer, the idea that that's an upper bound, meaning you probably don't want to pay more than that. You won't need to, because people will do it at that rate, but you can pay less if you find ways to run a content program that offer other sorts of incentives. So to get a little more into that, I want to speak to my own story and why I was writing blog posts initially 5 years ago for about $100 each. I was at the time an IT management consultant, and the rate sheet for that is pretty high. Like an IT management consultant is going to start at $200 an hour, assuming again you're billing by the hour, and go up from there. So why would I be doing that and then in my hotel room writing blog posts for $100 when I've said that that's, I guess, about 3 hours worth of time for a 1,000-word post? Good question. There are a few subtleties there. One of those is that I was already a blogger writing for my own blog. And when companies started to approach me about writing for them, they had no objection to me taking the content for them and also publishing it to my own blog for my own authors. So it was already found money for me in that situation. I was already blogging, and it was like somebody was coming along and paying me to do what I was already doing. So that was cool. Another reason is that I was getting free access to the software of these companies. They were saying, hey, you know, obviously if you're going to write for us, I'm going to give you a free copy of my software. And this was software I used in trade, so that was like actual value to me, even though it wasn't in the form of compensation. Another thing is I'm actually really prolific, having been a regular blogger for 10 years. It doesn't take me 3 hours to write a 1,000-word blog post. I can do that in 30, 40 minutes. So my effective hourly rate, even though it might not seem it to the people paying me, was still $150 or whatever. And then finally, having my name on these sites, like these were static analysis tools in the beginning, which, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, having my name on those sites as an expert positioned me very well in the niche that I was in. So it would lead to inbound business at times for my consulting practice. And it was something I could point to and say, hey, I write a column on this very specialized tools site. And that was impressive to the people who would be my buyers. So I think I just ticked off 4 pieces of non-monetary motivation that were good incentive for me to write posts on these sites that, you know, had nothing to do with the actual direct compensation. The reason I'm citing that is because I'm going to talk about how you can reduce, if you're paying for content, how you can reduce your costs in general. There are a lot of ways, some of which I just touched on. The first is you offer perks. So if you're doing a guest author program and the authors you're having write for you like your product or your brand or what have you, you can, you know, offer them freebies or discounts, but you could also offer them maybe perks in the form of like relationships with people at your company, networking, that kind of thing. So the relationship with you and with your offering can be an incentive. Another thing that I'll definitely say is give them a byline. So you can commission content and put your name on it or just not put the author's name on it. A lot of companies, when they first talk to Hit Subscribe about content, are kind of saying, oh, well, you know, we want to keep our own name on it. I would actually advise against that in most cases. There's nothing wrong with a guest author program. It's very common. You don't need your name on everything. And having the author's name on your site in front of your audience does a powerful thing. You know, it's good for their own marketing, whether they're employees and just kind of like looking to put on their resume that, you know, they're featured in these places, or maybe they're freelancers or consultants or whatever. Giving them that byline will often bring down your cost because they'll be willing to do that as a non-monetary perk. In general, look for authors that have a good reason to appear on your site, meaning if you can, look for freelancers, look for people where there's kind of a natural fit, and they're going to say, oh yeah, if I appear on, you know, xyz.com, that's good for me. It's good for my career. It's good for my practice. So go seek those folks out, and they will do it for cheaper, sometimes even for free. There's a popular thing out there for marketers, which is guest blogging appearances. So if you have companies with a marketing department, often they're out pitching, putting their like CEO's byline on other sites. Like we'll submit a guest article by our CEO for free because they're getting that traction. So if there are bloggers out there, guest bloggers that are willing to get on your site for free or a discount, that's a good source of keeping your costs down. Let's see what else I've got here. If you have a large audience for whatever reason, like if there's a lot of fans out there of your company and your brand, that's a huge incentive. If you're starting out as a newbie blogger, you're often for the first year just blogging to crickets. If a company comes along and says, hey, how would you like to write stuff and have it seen by our audience of thousands of people? A lot of people are really interested in that. They just want the exposure. Another thing I'll say is let the authors reuse or promote the content. So that's kind of what I alluded to in the beginning. With the blog posts I was writing, I would republish them on my own blog, doing something called canonical linking. So I was giving credit, but saying, hey, Eric's audience, here's a blog post I wrote. If you let them repurpose and reuse that content in certain ways that you approve of, that can go a long way towards keeping your costs down. And then the other thing I'll say, just that we found in Hit Subscribe, is if you tout kind of an author-minded editorial approach, and I'll get to the negative of this in a second, but if your author program says, hey, we bring in authors and we help polish your prose and we'll give you some writing perks, etc., that's valuable. There are a lot of people that are looking to blog to kind of improve their writing chops in addition to getting their name out there. So if you make it feel like guest blogging for you is going to come along with some writing coaching, there are a lot of people who really view that as a perk. So any or all of those things will let you establish a guest blogger program where you maybe bring the rates down below that market rate that I mentioned in the beginning. In terms of socializing that, if you've calculated that your average post per the method of calculation I gave you is $800, you might go out and say, well, we're going to roll out a number of these perks, and so we're going to start offering at $400 a post. That's a great way to socialize it, but when you roll it out and announce the program, I would announce those perks right alongside, like make them prominent features of your guest blogging program. And then when you do that, you're going to get feedback from people where they say, hey, that's not enough, I would want more money. That's fine. Your non-monetary perks won't apply equally to everybody. You'll get some people that'll say, nope, I'd only do it for my hourly rate, or maybe experts that even really don't like writing would only do it for twice their hourly rate. You're not going to win them all, but you'll get enough people where your non-monetary and monetary perks are the right mix. And then once you've got that, you're kind of in good shape. And I've seen this work over and over again, like with Hit Subscribe's program or other guest author programs. On the flip side of this, there are some things you can do if you're running a guest author program that actually have the inverse effect and drive costs way up because it becomes sort of miserable. So avoid those. One in particular is if you have an editorial arm, so when people submit content to you, if you have negative, non-constructive, or non-actionable feedback, like you're telling authors things like, this isn't very good, can you write it? Oh, you're going to burn people in a hurry. Usually the response to that, especially if these are in-demand experts, will be that they'll just ghost you. I mean, it's hard enough to get freelancers to write stuff for you on the site anyway, that a lot of people will just ghost you anyway. If you're doing things like that, if you're kind of like fancying yourself some kind of literary critic with their work, you're going to have a hard time. And if they stay with you, they're going to demand double or triple what you're advertising. If you have a style guide that you're giving to them in the beginning, a lot of people that come to running a content program from maybe an editorial background or certain kinds of marketing backgrounds are going to have this like prodigious brand style guide where, I don't like the use of the word we, and everything about our brand needs to be this, that, and the other. Try to chill on that, because if you're trying to get non-SME, non-marketing, or non-freelance writing people to write for you, that's pretty overwhelming. So that's another thing that'll burn a lot of people. They'll take a look at this like 4-page style guide and just say, never mind. Another thing that I would suggest doing to not increase your cost is create briefs for the content that are optional. So put a post title in front of the author that you're trying to pay to do this and say, hey, can you write a post with this title? For some authors, that is kind of the perfect amount of structure. They just want a title and they want to run with it. Others really appreciate having a whole outline in front of them so they don't have to come up with that. It runs the gamut. You can get the best of all worlds if you create a title and then you write out a brief that's guidance with an optional outline that they can follow. And that lets the people who like a lot of structure follow the structure, or the people who don't, you give them the license to say, look, do your own thing if you think it's better. That will kind of get the best of all worlds, and it'll prevent you from burning through authors because you won't be cutting out the people who have one preference or the other. And honestly, if you're getting the right kind of subject matter experts, they're going to know better than you as an editor or a marketer or whoever. Trust these people. If you're getting the right kind of people to write for you, you want to work with their opinions and expertise. Another big one that kind of ties in with the first couple, in addition to like, so if you're giving people like negative, non-actionable feedback, that's just going to burn them because it's just misery-inducing. But even if you're giving them constructive feedback, if it's like, hey, this post was great, but can you make the following 45 changes? That also tends to burn through authors quicker. You'll have more attrition and turnover in the program when you do that because it's a lot of work, even if it's upbeat and positive, even if you're kind of being instructive and giving them writing coaching. I would suggest trying to pick your battles on any one piece of content so that it doesn't feel like they're writing the whole post a second time with your feedback. Here's another big one that's kind of counterintuitive, I think, for a lot of people at first. Limit the number of reviewers that you subject an author to. So you'll see a lot of people running a guest author program who say, okay, I'm the editor, I'm the one running this program, so I'm going to do a pass at it. But then I'm going to take this post that you've written and put it in front of, these other 3 subject matter experts just to make sure everything looks good. If these subject matter experts are the same thing that the guest authors are subject matter experts in, for one, that can devolve into like arguments over shop that you as the editor can't even really administer. But in general, if you have a bunch of different people in a company that you're asking to review a guest author submission, those people are going to review it and they're going to find things because it's in the nature of the game. You're going to them and saying, hey, your job is to review this and find things. They're going to find things. So what you do is you stack all of these different pieces of feedback on top of one another. But usually it's not that you've balled all this up and you throw it back over to the author. These people will do this kind of out of band, and so it's just wave after wave of stuff, and that gets pretty tiresome. So I would suggest picking just like a person, and if you have to have multiple reviewers, consolidate the feedback, but like honestly, try to avoid multiple reviews. All of this kind of increases the misery and friction factor, which creates the attrition and flips people into what I call mercenary mode, where they're like, this is miserable, I want way more money for the next post. Then the last thing I will suggest you avoid in order to increase your costs, whatever you do, don't pay for blog posts by the hour. Again, I've alluded to this a few times. Generally not a fan of hourly pricing or hourly billing, whether I'm paying for it or whether I'm doing it. But there is probably no worse place for hourly billing than blog content, because if you think about it, you're going out and saying, okay, I'm going to pay you $100 an hour to write a blog post. What are you rewarding? You're rewarding the people who are the absolute slowest at writing blog posts. And that's just from an incentive perspective, that's kind of perverse. What you really want to do is pay a flat rate, and then as your authors get more efficient, they're kind of earning a better margin for their own time. So maybe in the beginning it's $200 a post, and they're saying, wow, this is taking me 10 hours, and that's $20 an hour. It's not great. 6 months in, when they get really good at it and efficient, now it's $100 an hour because it only takes them 2 hours. That's a great incentive structure. They're getting more efficient. The blog posts are getting better. Everybody wins. If you're paying them by the hour, it's going to like run your rate. You're going to burn through your budget really quickly while people aren't very good yet at what they're doing. So anyway, set a fixed rate based on something that is competitive in the market, which is kind of what I was alluding to in the beginning. Go out, figure out, 3-4 hours is a good ballpark. Pay them a rate where, unless they're really slow, that's probably decent. And then let them get more efficient with time. And it'll be better for your structure in the long run. Your budget's much more predictable for content because hey, I want to commission 20 pieces of content, $900 a post. What's that? $18,000 or whatever it is you're paying. You can predict that month over month and sort of reason on the marketing back end about your return on investment. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into the weeds about marketing itself. This is pricing blog posts. So just so you know, that is based on our experience. Pricing, I don't know, probably close to 2,000 blog posts. So we do have some insight on this front. And hopefully that's interesting if you're watching as somebody who wants to maybe earn a side hustle like writing blog posts. And also certainly I would imagine if you're thinking of paying for them. So yeah, costing blog posts is going to be difficult, but absolutely identify the segment or identify the persona who's going to be writing, and that's really your anchoring point, is what does that person command on the market, and that times that rule of thumb, 3 hours or so to write a 1,000-word blog post. That'll give you all of the information you need to give kind of a reasonable price, and then you can construct a program that maybe brings that down a little bit by offering some good perks to those folks. So hopefully that's been interesting. I did remember I'm going to go in after this video and put a link to the blog post I wrote in the comments. If you want to check that out, please feel free. And yeah, thanks for watching. I will catch you next time.